So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Welcome to another webinar from Secure IT 360. Today, we'll be covering some insights for various updates and revisions happening in 2024 to a selection of cybersecurity frameworks and compliance requirements that are going to help drive your security program strategy. Before we get going, just a brief introduction to Secure IT 360, if this is your first time joining us. Here at Secure IT 360, we are a full-service, specialized cybersecurity and compliance consulting firm with offices in Birmingham, Alabama, and Kansas City, Missouri. We were founded in 2009, and since then, we've seen consistent growth year over year. Our founder, David Forrestal, he's put together a team of experienced credentials professionals who are collectively focused on the physics of securing IT. We're proud to be an independent, vendor-agnostic technology company focused on developing programs and systems specifically cater to our clients' needs. We know it's not a one-size-fits-all. Every company is a little unique in what they need. We empower our clients with the advice they need to improve and maintain their security posture. It's our job really to know the many facets of cybersecurity and compliance, and it's our goal to help you uncover those internal security issues that nearly every IT department faces, that they just don't have the time, manpower, or resources to discover and take care of. So we have 4 areas of services that we primarily offer. That's run our managed SOC. That's a 24/7, 365, where we do MDR, XDR, and EDR alerting. We've got a penetration testing team or an offensive security team where we do external pen testing, internal pen testing, and web application pen testing. For our forensic services, when you have those incidents, we've got a team that can help identify what's going on and move you toward containment and remediation. And our last group here is focused around the team that I'm on, which is our Information Security Officer, or ISO team. We do consulting and assessments, gap assessments. So with that, our goal is to help our clients identify the risks, prepare and measure their present state of security, and move towards that improved posture of safety and security. For myself, my name is Daniel Perkins. I'm a Senior Information Security Officer here at Secure IT 360. I live near Denver, Colorado, and I've been with the firm since 2021. I have active certifications in CISSP, CISM, CISA, and most recently CRISC. Just like a lot of us in this first generation of cybersecurity, I started in IT, right? Started at IT help desk, moved up to IT management, and eventually into cybersecurity. First large project I had was actually somewhat related to this, where I was engaged or committed to bring the firm I was at up to certification to ISO 27001. And today, what I do, how I serve our clients, I work with our clients doing gap assessments based on different standards, do program development, so risk management, vulnerability management, third-party vendor management, whatever they need, and of course, be CISO. And with that comes adhering to these various compliance requirements and aligning a security program to some of these security frameworks. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to cover today. We've got 7 areas of compliance and security that we're going to cover that are going to have some impact on businesses and organizations heading into 2024. Now, this impact could be directly in scope for you, right? It could be that you're directly in scope for consumer privacy laws, for HIPAA rules, or for AI. But certainly the other consideration I want you to think about is that these compliance requirements tend to roll downhill. So even if you're not directly in scope, it's likely that some of your clients, customers, other firms, suppliers that you engage with, they're going to have to adhere to these compliance requirements. So it's a good idea to understand what might be coming. So we're going to take a look at some of the U.S. privacy law updates. We've got updates to SEC around incident reporting, but some other cybersecurity. We've got updates to the GLBA, FTC safeguard rules that we're going to review. We've got what was proposed, which is now published changes to the HIPAA implementation guidance. So we'll look at that. Again, another one since draft that kind of popped on us yesterday was an update to NIST CSF 2.0. That is now published, so we'll take a look at some of that. We've got 2 AI frameworks we're going to look at with OWASP and NIST respectively. And we're going to close out with a quick look at how here at Secure IT 360 we can help you manage these various compliance frameworks with our GRC tool. Now, we do have a lot of topics to cover, as you can see, for today. So we're not going to be going too deep dive into any one of these, simply because we want to cover a lot of ground across the various topics we've got. Now, of course, this is also not a comprehensive and complete list of changes coming in 2024. So while you might not be seeing your favorite framework around PCI or FAFSA or some other framework. Really, our goal is just to give you some insight to what's coming to drive further discussions and analysis for your organization or firm. Now, across all these frameworks and some of the ones that are not covered today, there's kind of three overarching elements that I'm going to be calling out today that I want you to kind of be aware of that you're going to see throughout the year. First, we're seeing an increased focus on third-party or vendor risk management. So a lot of these frameworks are kind of getting beyond the four walls of our business, and they're understanding that we have a lot of dependencies and requirements that need to flow down to our third-party or vendors that we use. The second point I want you to be aware of is that a lot of these standards were written before the migration to cloud and software as a service. So again, a lot of these frameworks are getting pushed out of the four walls of our data center or the four walls of our building, and they want you to be aware and taking care of those cloud and software as a service providers to make sure that you have a comprehensive look at where your data lives and resides. The third element here that you're going to see a lot of as we go through is a continued focus on risk management. Like I said, when we help our clients develop their programs, we take a risk-based approach based on the risk to that organization. So a lot of these frameworks are flexible in that because not every business is the same. The risk that one organization sees from another will not match, and so there cannot be the same solution. And so when you look at risk management, we have to develop a solution, a mitigation plan that fits that business and that risk. All right. So with that, let's get going. And like I said, we're going to start with privacy laws. All right, and these are US privacy laws. We're not going to focus on anything international. But when it comes to privacy laws, there's a resource I like to use that really gives a comprehensive look at the US state privacy legislation. And that's from the IAPP, or International Association of Privacy Professionals. They do awesome work, and they do a lot of the legwork for me to see what's happening in these US privacy laws, since we have to go state by state because there is no federal law yet that's going to dictate consumer privacy throughout the country. So they've got a great resource here, and I'm just going to highlight some of what they're putting out there. So as of February 2024, we have 13 states that have signed and passed privacy laws. Now, most of these privacy laws are being driven off California's lead. Like, they started a few years back with the CCPA, and even that was built on the EU or European Union GDPR, General Data Privacy Regulation. So there's a lot of commonality in these things, but there's also differences in the various states that we're seeing. When you look at these states' laws, some of them are named consumer privacy, like California. We have others that are named consumer protection, or data privacy, or information protection, and so forth. So when you're looking at these various states, just keep that in mind as you're trying to look at what they require. Now, many of these laws that were passed and signed in 2023 do not go into effect until sometime later. So you can look at this list and see in 2023, we had 5 new or updated. 2024, we'll show in a minute that we've got 3 states going into effect. And there's a continued trend in 2024 and 2026. There are also 17 states that are in progress for passing some sort of privacy law. This could be in committee in their Congress. It could be in cross chamber. There's even a few that have passed the privacy law, but it's just not been signed by the governor yet. So we will see more of this coming as we go forward. Now, like I said, last year in 2023, we had updates to California, Colorado, Connecticut, Utah, and Virginia with their privacy laws going into effect or being updated. California's update in 2023 was to add the California Privacy Rights Act, which largely amended the CCPA, or the California Consumer Privacy Act. This year, though, we've got Texas and Oregon starting off. They're going to go into effect in July of this year. And Montana's privacy law is going to go into effect in October of this year. Now, if you're not familiar, I want to give you a quick refresh on some of the consumer rights that are given by these laws. And look, even though there is some commonality, there are absolutely differences between each state, what they offer, how they protect their consumers. But in principle, these are the consumer rights that each privacy law gives. First, access. We have to provide access to our consumers for the data that the business has on them. Next, the ability to correct the data that we have on a consumer. That's one of the consumer rights given. Deletion of any personal information. Now, there's conditions on this where if a business needs to retain that information for some other regulatory requirement, then we have to maintain some level of transactional data. But in principle, if we can delete the data, we should based on the consumer's request. There's also opt-in and out of processing or sensitive data that the consumer can exercise. This one is popping up around portability, where a consumer can take their data out of your business and move it to another. So we have to allow them to exercise that right. And we've got a prohibition on automated decision making. Now, this is AI, right? Already machine learning. Anytime we're taking a human out of the decision on what we're going to offer or extend to a consumer, consumers have the right to say, hey, I don't want to do that. I want a human looking at my case, and I do not want any sort of automated decision around it. So if you've got AI models that are helping you make decisions around your consumers, you need to make sure that you have a way to opt consumers out if requested. Another right, and this is primarily around California, is a private right to action for any civil damages for businesses. Now, to go along with the consumer rights, we as businesses have a obligation or duty to do things related to these privacy rights or consumer rights. So we must consider these in our security and privacy programs. So let's go through some of these. First is an opt-in default age. So this is a restriction on businesses that we've got to treat customers under a certain age with opt-in defaults, right? So we can't sell their personal information without this opt-in. Next, we've got a notice of transparency requirements. So this is effectively, hey, when we create our privacy policy and what we're going to do and how we're going to collect data and use it and protect it, we've got to inform our consumers about how we're going to operate. Next, like I said, in the agenda, we're seeing this focus on risk assessments. We've got an obligation to perform a formal, meaning documented, risk assessment of our privacy and security programs, process, and procedures. Now, there's also prohibition on discrimination, and this is around the consumer exercising any of those rights before. So if a consumer exercises their right for deletion, portability, anything else, decision-making, automated decision-making, we are not going to treat that consumer differently based on how they've exercised any of those rights. Finally, we've got a purpose limitation right. We only want to collect the data that we need to execute on our business to serve our consumers. And if we're going to collect data, it's got to have a valid use case, how we're going to use this. As an example, I was working with a marketing team a while back, and it was a business-to-business engagement, and they were saying, hey, let's collect some data about our customers, our business-to-business, and they wanted to ask for birth date for a business-to-business connection. I'm like, friends, what do we need a birth date for, right? We don't need that information to serve another business or a user, right? So limitation of the data can go a long way, right? You don't have to protect what you don't have. So if you don't collect the data in the first place, perfect, you don't have to protect it. The other part of that is if you are going to collect data, you need to have an explicit purpose how you're going to use that data to serve your customer. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but in principle, something to be aware of too is that these privacy laws apply to the consumer in the state they reside. So if your business is serving consumers in another state, regardless of where you operate, the consumer laws apply based on where that consumer lives. So consider that as you're building your privacy program and your security policies, that the obligation for these consumer rights, privacy rights, they extend to where the consumer is, not necessarily where you're operating your business. So takeaway here for privacy updates, really just be aware we've got additional states coming online this year and next year, and we've got these business obligations that are now popping up that we need to make sure we're building into our security and privacy programs. All right, so let's take a look at the SEC cybersecurity updates. So the Security and Exchange Commission, or SEC, they've adopted updates to their cybersecurity rules that went into effect in December of last year. So if you've not already made some changes based on these new requirements, now's a great time to get started here in February 2024. So a quick review of the scope and reporting requirements when it comes to SEC. So SEC is really focused around publicly traded companies, and they're reporting to stakeholders, which is largely shareholders, but also to the SEC. Now, like I said, you may not be in scope for the SEC directly because you're not a publicly traded company, but it's likely or possible that you are at some level in the supply chain serving and providing services to a company that is publicly traded. So it's wise to be aware of the changes that they are facing. Now, the change that we saw has been around incident reporting, risk management, and foreign private issuers. So let's take a look at what those are. Now, the incident reporting change, that kind of got the big headlines about what the SEC published. And the requirement here is to report any material incident within 4 days after you determine it is a material incident. Now, there's a key word there, material, right? So if you've not already defined that word material in your incident response plan, I would recommend go ahead and making that change as soon as you can. Now you might be asking, Daniel, what's a material incident? Well, again, you need to consult with your team and maybe even your legal, but there's a couple of types of incidents that I would classify as material. Certainly any incident that's going to affect personal or consumer data, that would be what I would recommend you classify as a material incident. Another type would be anything that stops critical operations for your organization or your business. So if this incident stops operations, that's certainly critical. I cannot serve my customers, my clients. That's critical material to our business. Certainly the last category I would say would be that any material incident would be something that puts the health and safety of humans at risk, right? If you're in some sort of environment where health and human safety is of importance, that's going to be a material incident that you would want to report. Now, the second part of this update was around cybersecurity risk management. This one didn't quite get as much headlines, but I do think it's equally as important. And again, the requirement here is that you have a description of processes, right? So if you don't have a documented formal risk management process, now is a great time to get started. There's a couple elements that you need to make sure are part of this documented risk management, and they're pretty straightforward if you're familiar with risk management: of identification, assessment, and management of material risk. There's that material word again, right? Now, most of these material risks need to be brought up to the board. What the SEC is requiring is that board have oversight of these material risks. So I wouldn't bring my whole risk register of 100 and some odd items, but certainly those material risks, anything that's going to fit that definition of material, you want to bring that up for the board's oversight. The other part of this is around management's role in the assessment and management of the risk. That's got to be defined in your risk assessment process and procedures. The SEC is looking to see that the board and management are involved in these material cybersecurity risks. Now, for foreign private issuers, it's effectively the same thing. They've got to adhere to both the incident reporting guidance as well as the cybersecurity risk management. Companies in this space, you're probably already familiar, but you're going to use Form 8K for incidents, Form 10K for risk management, and for those foreign issuers, you're going to use Form 6K and Form 20F. So that's what we've got for SEC cybersecurity. We've got the incident reporting, and equally important is that cybersecurity risk management documentation. All right, and let's take a look at GLBA and FTC safeguard updates. All right, so if you're not familiar with this one, this is being driven off the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or the GLBA, and it's being enforced by the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission. The scope of this law is focused around financial institutions. So what's an example of a financial institution? Is probably what you're thinking. Well, some examples would be retailers that issue credit cards, banks offering any credit services, so that could be mortgage, auto loans, personal loans, anything like that. Tax preparations in scope for this, check cashing, higher education. Basically, if you're handling any sort of consumer credit or financial information, you're in scope for the GLBA and FTC safeguards. Now, the focus here, like I said, is around non-public consumer information. Now, traditionally, that's PII, right? Personal identifiable information. But the extension here is around personal identifiable financial information. Now, what does that mean? Think of the traditional items you would put on a loan application or a credit card application. These types of financial data that are private, confidential, that we just don't want public, that's the focus for the data that's in scope here. Now, there are some limitations if you're serving fewer than 5,000 consumers, but as a professional in the cybersecurity space, I would recommend, hey, let's go ahead and do these things. They're just good hygiene, good practice. While there's no mandate or requirement to do it, it's still just good practice. Now, the FTC safeguards went into effect of June of last year with an update, and with this exclusion for some of these smaller companies, that's the goal here, is to serve smaller companies. There's no requirement for a documented risk assessment, no requirement for documented incident response plans, or that annual reporting by a qualified individual. Another element that they're trying to relieve for these smaller businesses is around continuous vulnerability assessment, and that penetration testing can be excluded. However, they're just good cyber hygiene, cyber practice, cybersecurity. So I would still recommend that while there's no mandate to do these things, it's still good practice, and I would highly recommend it. Now, we also saw later in the year an update go out for incident reporting requirements, and this is going to affect May of this year. And the FTC provided guidance for the following requirements for when you must report a cybersecurity incident. Now, again, here we're kind of looking at a specific definition of unencrypted consumer information is impacted, right? So if I've lost a laptop and the drive is encrypted and I've got MFA on that device, I don't necessarily have to report it, right? Because that data was encrypted. So the other element here is at least 500 consumers. So if the incident that I'm experiencing is not affecting more than 500, I don't have to report it. Curious here, we've got some diversion, right? In the prior slide, we saw, hey, if you're fewer than 5,000 consumers, you don't have to do these things. But if you're greater than 500 consumers in an incident, you do have to follow these requirements. And notice the disparity here too. With fewer than 5,000, you don't have to have a documented incident response plan. But if you have an incident affecting 501 consumers, hey, you've got to do incident response and do these things. So again, this gets back to, hey, just because I don't have to doesn't mean I shouldn't. It's still good cyber hygiene to have a documented incident response plan. Now, the other element here is 30 days of discovery after an event. Again, we see some difference between what the SEC is requiring versus what GLBA and FTC safeguards are requiring. Finally, you've got to report this incident through the FTC website. And there's specific reporting elements when you go through that you're going to have to include, such as who's affected, what you've been doing. I want to point out here too that just because with both the SEC and the FTC safeguards, you have a requirement to report to those organizations, but it does not relieve you of any other notification requirements. So if you have a requirement to notify consumers based on this type of data breach, reporting it to the SEC or FTC does not relieve you of those other additional requirements. This is in addition to the requirements for notifications that you already have. This is not in lieu of or replacement of. So just keep that in mind as you're building your incident response plans. So again here, I'd recommend incorporating these requirements into your incident response plans, making sure you call these out. It's good practice so that when you have an incident, you know what to do. It also looks good for any regulators who are coming by and they see in your incident response plan that you've got these steps documented. All right, so let's take a look at HIPAA. And like I said, since I started the draft, these things have now gone published. So the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, really today we're focused on the implementation guidance. So not so much the HIPAA law itself, but really the guidance from NIST around how to implement the security rules that come from HIPAA. Now, the guidance was first issued in 2008. It's now 2024, so it's definitely been some time. And so the focus here is around changes to NIST 866, revision 2. Now, one thing that we get a lot of questions around is, Daniel, am I in scope for HIPAA? So if you're not familiar, I'm going to cover some of the covered entities that if you're in one of these, you are considered a covered entity for HIPAA. So first is healthcare providers, right? If you're providing medical services, healthcare, mental health care to a patient, you're certainly in scope as a covered healthcare provider. Next one's going to be health plans. So these are, the Blue Cross Blue Shields, the Medicare, Medicaid, the folks providing the health plan to cover the cost of medical care. Those are in scope as a covered entity. Next one is healthcare clearinghouses. So these are public or private entities that are helping facilitate the transactions, effectively being that middleman, but that's another conversation. Moving data back and forth between these healthcare covered entities. The last group, which is what we see a lot of clients falling into, is this business associate. But I want to be clear, business associate, they're performing certain functions or activities that involve the use or disclosure of protected healthcare information on behalf of one of these other covered entities. If you're an employee of a covered entity, that does not necessarily make you a business associate. The other element here is just because you're working with one of these entities does not make you a business associate. So when we work with clients, we try to take a look at how they're engaging with a covered entity to see if they're truly in scope for HIPAA security rules or not. So what we're seeing around this revision 2 that was just published a couple of days ago, it's largely incremental changes, right? We're not seeing a whole change to the structure of the security roles and how the revision is updated. Now, there are going to be some changes in the document that you'll see, but as far as a wholesale change or encompassing change of the security role implementation guidance, it's pretty incremental is what you're going to see. So let's take a look at some of the changes. And again, I have not had a chance to review the entire revision update. But I do want to highlight some of the changes that I saw in the draft version. First thing that I want to point out that was interesting to me was the additional goal and objective for insurance compliance of security of the workforce, right? Now, previously, this was probably inferred, right? Hey, if we're going to do this security rule, our workforce has to be in compliance to the HIPAA security rule. But I think it's interesting that they've called this out as an additional goal and objective, and you should definitely mirror that in your security program to make sure that you've got this, we're removing any inference, right? We are definitely going to have this goal to make sure our workforce is compliant to the security rule. So we're training our folks, we're giving them the information they need, we're publishing policies, procedures, and we're following that up with some sort of enforcement. All right, next, which I found interesting too, was direct guidance on the risk management process. If you've been doing risk management, it's going to look very familiar to what you're used to when it comes to impact and probability. I found it interesting that this is one of the few standards that describes a specific process that they would like to see or gives you an example of what you could follow. A lot of the frameworks that we work with and see, they just give you an objective of, hey, do risk management that fits your organization. This is one where they specifically called out a method and process that they would like you to follow, and it's got that impact and probability matrix, so you're scoring things by the potential impact to your business, as well as the probability that incident could occur. So if you don't have anything formal for risk management, certainly section 3 of this document is a great place to start and get that foundation, and I'll go ahead and align you to the HIPAA security rule. Another element that popped out to me was additional clarification on what business associates and subcontractors must do. In prior version, the language is around that BAs and subs would protect PHI. Words are important, and so the language has changed slightly. The language is now BAs and subs must comply to the HIPAA security rule. Again, similar to the workforce, right? It's inferred that our BAs and subs would protect and comply with the HIPAA security rule, but now it's the language has changed where our BAs and subs must comply with the security rule. Now, like I said earlier in the kickoff too, some of the language, and again, words are important here. In prior versions, you might be able to scope out some of your mobile devices because they were mobile and they weren't within the data center. But now we're seeing some of the language extend, right? It's 2024. I can't think of a healthcare practice that doesn't have some sort of mobile device running around in their offices serving patients. So those are definitely going to be in scope now, no question about it. So summary here for NIST 866, really incremental changes largely. And since this is brand new, you can expect some updates for us in the coming weeks where we'll take a little deeper dive into some of the changes and maybe what you need to be aware of outside of these highlights. All right, so let's take a look at NIST CSF 2.0. Now, this is another one that since my draft and today has gone published and has gone final. So if you're not familiar with NIST CSF, this is the NIST cybersecurity framework. We are now at version 2.0. It was published yesterday, February 26th. What we're seeing here is larger changes than what we see in the 866 document. It's more comprehensive. In fact, there's a new domain added for governance, right? And you're going to see as we look at it that a lot of the controls that were through the other domains were brought into this new govern domain or governance. I think nearly every control throughout this CSF was touched in some way, moved around, changed, deprecated. So you're going to see a large reorganization of NIST CSF. Another domain that saw some significant changes is the identify domain. Many of the governance controls were pulled from this. In addition, you're going to see additional controls for continuous improvement, regular reviews, lessons learned cycle. Those are getting more called out in the identify domain. So let's take a look at some of the elements in the govern domain. Now, pretty straightforward. what you would expect for governance, right? We want to establish and monitor the organization's cybersecurity risk management, strategy, expectations, and policy. Now, if you look through this list, you're going to see that many of the controls are coming from the prior version, right? We're pulling, like I said, from those identified controls. And they've been renamed, remapped to this new governed domain. So we want to understand the context of our organization, right? Make sure we understand our stakeholders, what we're doing, why it's important to do cybersecurity. We also need to have a formalized risk management strategy, right? We want to see where we've got things documented. We've got documented risks that we're reviewing. Again, third party, cybersecurity, supply chain risk management, right? We got to identify those vendors that we're working with that are helping us serve our clients, customers, and make sure we've got a good grasp of the risks they pose to ourselves. Documented roles and responsibilities. Pretty straightforward here. We understand who's doing what, who's got authority to make decisions, changes, and as we identify changes, we have roles and responsibilities defined. Policies and procedures, again, pretty straightforward here. Want to make sure we've got published policies, procedures that are established and communicated. Last part here is around oversight. This is really, that continuous improvement lessons learned that, hey, as we identify risks, we mitigated them, we're reviewing them. We've identified that, hey, this control is working or it's not, so we're going to make changes to improve the security and safety of our firm. So I called out identify and governance some changes, but another one that always bugged me with the version 1.1 was the recover domain. It just didn't have a lot of meat, and it just felt very much like an afterthought of when the folks were developing NCSF 1.1, they kind of got to the end like, hey, what do we do for recovery? We gotta have something. Oh, just throw one controller and we're fine. Version 2.0, we're seeing significant change to the recovery domain, which is fantastic. There's significant effort here to push towards verification and validation of your recovery operations. So with this, we've now got clear controls on the when, the how, the who, and what to do for recovery. A couple of things I want to point out here. Backup testing, right? Getting that documented backup testing. That's going to be important as you're following this CSF 2.0. Another element here when it comes to recovery, identifying the business impact, right? Not every application has the same criticality to the business, right? So we need to make sure that we're recovering operations in a way that meets that business impact. Another element here too, and this is important as well, talking about the integrity checks. When we're bringing things back online, we're validating that the system is working as expected, that we're not bringing any compromised data or systems back into operation that might re-expose us to whatever attack we have suffered. So there's other elements here, but again, we're going from one control in 1.1 for recover up to 6. So quite a significant change here. And this is mirrored throughout all the other changes. So that's my summary for NIST CSF 2.0. We've got an encompassing new governance here with the domains. We've seen nearly every control updated, touched in some way. Similar to NIST 866 around HIPAA, you can expect some updates for us in the coming weeks. We'll do a little deeper dive on some of the changes between NIST CSF 1.1 and 2.0. So let's talk about AI. There's a couple AI frameworks I wanted to highlight because that's becoming a big deal in our organizations. So if you're not familiar with OWASP, OWASP is the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. They are a nonprofit foundation. They're not aligned to any specific vendor, and they developed open source projects to help facilitate various security, IT implementations, really guide you through implementing solutions in your environment. Now, the goal of this framework is to advance AI in a safe and responsible way, right? They want to enable AI in your business and not just be the traditional security of no, right? Now, this does follow other frameworks that we've seen from OWASP around machine learning and large language models. So you'll see some similarities there. And one of the missions for OWASP is to drive other standards, drive other frameworks. So you're going to see elements of this in some of the ISO frameworks, EU frameworks, and other frameworks related to AI development that are going to help really engage your business in a safe and responsible way to develop AI. The OWASP AI Exchange is broken down into a few categories to help establish your program. One thing I want to point out about this program versus the NIST one, which we'll look at in a moment, is this is focused largely towards, I'm going to call it the IT implementation of AI in your environment. Of course, there's some risk elements in here too, but this is focused towards, hey, I'm an IT guy. I want to develop AI. I want to bring it into my environment. I want to understand how it works, what it's going to do. The other point about this one is it will take some time to implement into your environment. It is not quite as plug and play as some of the other frameworks we've seen. So just know that if you're going to take on this framework, it will take some time to operationalize in your environment. So let's just take a look around here, some of these controls and groupings they've got. So first, you're going to establish some general controls, right? How are we going to use AI? Where can it be used? Where should it not be used? What types of data can we put into our AI? Next step here is going to be threats through use, right? So as we're using the AI, right, this is once we've got it developed and works with doing it, what are some of the threats that might come to it? What are some of the things that might bring my AI model down, right? You know, is there a chance that, hey, the sensitive data I'm dropping into my AI, is there a chance it could leak out and I've got data going where I don't want it to go? Third part here is around development of your AI model, right? So as you're developing it, we want to identify threats for how that model can be manipulated. Hey, if I'm dropping data in here, how could that data be altered? And that might change how my AI responds to various queries or inputs, right? The fourth one here around runtime application security threats, that's largely how the delivery method, right? Once I have built my AI and I'm exposing it to my users, what are the threats that come from that? Am I putting it on a web page, right? Am I putting it in a mobile app? How am I delivering it? And then what threats might come from that delivery method for how my users are going to consume this AI model? What you're also going to see in this OS AI Exchange is it does pull a lot from other frameworks. You're going to see a lot of references to ISO frameworks, ISO standards. And so it's going to help you, again, develop that AI management platform for IT operations. So just to summarize here, there's some great elements in here. We've got largely IT-focused risks as far as the development and delivery of AI. But again, the goal here is to help you drive towards safe and responsible use of AI in your environment. Next, another AI risk management framework. We've got this one coming from NIST. There's a lot of NIST today that we're going through. So NIST started its AI risk management framework with publication last year in 2023. It was followed in March with the NIST AI Risk Management Framework Playbook, and that's going to guide you through implementing the four domains of the risk management framework. So there are 4 domains here. We've got govern, map, measure, manage. We're going to take a look at those in a moment. Like most other risk or NIST-based frameworks, voluntary adoption here, right? There's no mandatory requirement that you adopt this AI risk management framework. Further on that, you can pick and choose which parts of this framework you want to use, right? Maybe you want to take some of the elements from map and measure, but not all of them. So you can choose what's important for you to design a program that fits your needs and fits your risk profile. Now, this is being used as the framework or foundation for NIST as they develop their Trustworthy and Responsible Artificial Intelligence Resource Center, or AIRC. So I wanted to focus on this. If you're following AI, you may say, Daniel, hey, what about the AIRC? I wanted to focus on this today because this is really the foundation, the fundamentals of how the AIRC is going to work. So I wanted to focus on where they're starting and which direction they're going in. So let's take a look at some of the elements of the risk management framework. So if you do risk management, there's going to be a lot here that looks familiar to you and even some similarities to what we saw with the OS model. So looking around here, we've got govern, right? Again, we want to understand how we're using the AI tools in our environment, identify what legal risk we might have. Diversity here, what we don't want to do is use, develop, and start our AI model with, I'm going to use a term because I fit this, an IT propellerhead group, right? We want to make sure we've got a good demographic of both personal demographics, but also expertise, right? We're not just pulling from IT friends to develop our IT model or our AI model. We're pulling from other business units. We're pulling from marketing. We're pulling from HR. We're pulling from manufacturing, whatever it might be in your environment, that we're pulling those expertise from other folks to make sure we get a good AI model. Again, supply chain risk here, right? We're seeing that pop up all over the place where we may or may not be hosting this environment. We may have other developers developing our AI model. So we want to make sure we have a good understanding of how they're going to work. So we've established some governance. Now we're going to map how we're going to use this AI. What's the context to our business? Benchmarks, right? That's important, right? We don't want to develop a tool that doesn't meet what we expect, right? So what are some of the benchmarks we're looking for, and what are some of the risks to hitting those benchmarks? Next, we move into measure, right? So we've identified our benchmarks. Let's start measuring against those benchmarks. Are we getting trustworthy results from our AI model? How are we managing and tracking our risk to our AI model? Is it doing what we expected, right? Is it developing in the way we expected? Is it delivering what we wanted out of our AI model? And of course, last with this is management, right? We've identified our risks, we've mapped them and measured them. How are we managing them? How are we bubbling them up to management? Are we getting the benefits we expected? And again, third parties here, right? That's popping back up again. Are the suppliers that we're engaging, are they meeting our expectations? Are they keeping our data, our information private and secure? So what I want to point out with both of these AI risk models or management frameworks, rather, we want to strive towards a point where we're saying yes to safe and responsible use of AI. We want to enable our firms, our businesses to leverage AI while we understand the risk it does present to our organizations. Certainly, we want to be the business that uses AI to deliver whatever it is that we provide to our consumers, our customers, smarter, faster, so we will be ahead of the AI wave. So takeaway here is really this just provide guidance on the risk of AI in your environment, whereas the OWASP is a little more focused on the implementation, the IT management. This NIST AI risk management framework is focused on the risk management that comes from AI. All right, so let's talk about how to manage all these frameworks and compliance requirements. So to wrap things up here, I want to encourage you, as we're seeing all these different requirements for compliance, for security frameworks, one tool that you can use to really help manage this is a GRC tool. Now, if you're not familiar with the GRC tool, that's around governance, risk, and compliance of your security program. So one of the primary goals of a GRC tool is to help you manage one security program that's going to meet all of these requirements based on whichever compliance or security framework that you're using. And the goal here is to map that one program to many standards like NIST, HIPAA, ISO, SOC, or others. Another goal that we can see with the GRC tool is continuous improvements. I can see where my program is improving over time, maybe where it's falling behind, and so I can identify those areas for continuous improvement. Another advantage to a GRC tool is as these new compliance requirements come out, right? We saw new that even two today that were new even since my draft was developed that are now published. As you drop these models into your GRC tool, you're going to instantly see how you stack up against those new requirements. Now, one of the biggest headaches with a GRC tool, and that I hear all the time, and when I talk to clients about it, is, hey, Daniel, look, GRC, it's just hard to manage. There's a lot of detailed elements. I don't have the time, right? Well, at Security 360, we've launched our own CyberOS dashboard, and the goal here is to help our clients easily manage their GRC program. The goal here for us is really to take a lot of the burden of policy management, risk management, compliance tracking, put it into one central place for our clients to help manage their security program. With a few questionnaires and self-assessments, we're able to quickly identify any gaps to compliance, identify areas for improvement, and give you a guided task list to improve your security posture. Now, this tool will map your program based on what you provide to a number of standards, including SCSF, HIPAA, and SOC. And we do offer this in either a self-managed or assistant model tool where one of our ISO team members, we're going to help you guide through your program. So if you want to learn more about this tool, just drop us a note in chat or email me and we'll get you started. All right, so that's everything I had for today. Just a quick recap before we wrap up. So we looked at some privacy law updates here in the US. As we see, more states are going into line. We've got those not only consumer rights we've got to be aware of, but also those business obligations that we've got to follow. We had updates to the SEC cybersecurity rules, again, around that material incident reporting, material risk management, reporting that up to the board and management. For GLBA and FTC safeguards, we looked at the updated incident reporting guidance on the FTC and some of the exclusions or requirements of when we must report to the FTC. We looked at proposed changes, which are now published and live for HIPAA with their updated security implementation guidance in that NIST 866. Again, here we saw updates to the risk management guidance as well as other incremental changes through the HIPAA security implementation guidance. NIST CSF 2.0, again, another one that went live since my draft was ready. Again, this one we saw updates to nearly every control, right? And we've got that new domain of govern. So lots of big changes in NIST CSF 2.0. We looked at 2 AI models between OWASP and NIST. Again, OWASP, that's really guidance on how to build your AI program lifecycle, and it's guiding other security frameworks around AI. With the NIST AI risk management framework, that's going to give you a map, a program to identify those risks from AI development. And then we took a quick look at how we help our clients manage all these frameworks with our GRC tool. Like I said, with the updated HIPAA implementation guidance, as well as the NIST CSF 2.0, you can expect some additional content from us over the coming weeks for those 2 updates. Again, just to recap some of the overarching elements that I want you to be aware of for these compliance. We've got that continued focus on third-party supply chain vendor risk management in your environment. So make sure you're getting a good understanding of what vendors you're using, which ones are critical, what's holding the data, the keys to your kingdom, so to speak. Next is around extending the scope of our security program, making sure, because we need to document that we're taking into account all those cloud and software as a service, making sure that our security program is comprehensive outside of the 4 walls of our building. Last element that we're seeing overarching on a lot of these frameworks is around risk management, getting that documented risk management process. It's no longer sufficient just to say, yeah, we do risk management. We've got to show that documented evidence of what we're doing. All right, and that'll wrap us up for today. Thank you so much for joining. Hope you learned something today. I hope it was beneficial. I hope you got something out of it. Love to connect with you. If you want, there's my contact info. Let me slide over this way so you can see it. And but that'll wrap us up for today.